Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We have two terrific poets with us today, Susan Suntree and Michelle Bitting. Susan will read first, and then Michelle. Susan Suntree is a poet, performer, essayist, and activist whose multiple books of poetry include This Time, This Place, forthcoming, Dear Traveler, the updated paperback and audiobook of her multiple award-winning and best-selling nonfiction epic poem, Sacred Sites, The Secret History of Southern California, written under the guidance of Western scientists and indigenous Southern California cultural bearers. Site-specific performances exploring Los Angeles include, among others, Origins of Praise, commissioned by the Manhattan Theater Club, Send Seed to Snow, Plays for the Seasons, Talking to the Sun for the LA Fringe Festival, and the Eco-Political Street Theater Works, Wetlands Land, Saving Private Pickle Plant, and Earth, Water, Air, Los Angeles, a 4-day giant puppet trek following the path of the LA River to the Balbona wetlands. Her current work in progress, The Undertakers, confronts the war roots of the climate crisis. She often accompanies her readings with the dulcimer and harmonica. Here's a wonderful poet, Susan Suntree.
Thank you. Thank you, Harry. Thank you, Jennifer. Great to meet you, Michelle. And thanks to everyone who's tuned in. We're going to have a great hour. So I'm going to begin with an invocation, actually two. And this first one is from my book, Dear Traveler, which guides us through a year and a lifetime. And each poem is addressed to the traveler. This one is called Song. Traveler, you are the song of your own making, without knowing the notes. Music rises without tongue, no strings, no reeds. The sound begins as a chorus. Desert winds circle brush and spare stalks of grass. How dry sticks sing is what the wind wants to know. How do you hear when even your ears are singing? This next poem is from the forthcoming book, This Time, This Place, from Shanti Arts Press, and it is a book of poems that contemplates, as the title suggests, the present moment. But this is an invocation at the beginning of the book to the place where we are. It's called California Coast. 3 red roofs on a sea-roar cliff. 3 boxes, clapboard, glass, azure houses, set at the verge of a slow-flowing continent. A rich blue-green rolls into trenches, foaming crests carried all the way from China, pound rocks and iron-red dirt, foundations and yard, once layered beneath an older ocean. Seafloor burst through cracks and volcano mouths from the Earth's deep down fluid well. And beneath, the Earth's own fire. And before, stars, stars, stars. I'm going to read briefly from my book, Sacred Sites, that Harry mentioned. This book tells the story of how Southern California landscape was created, both from the point of view of Western science and indigenous myths and songs. They're surprisingly similar, in fact. I'm reading this because we often see the earth and talk about the earth and life on earth as such a wonder. But the universe itself is a wonder. It's a crazy story if you stop to think about it. It can only be written about poetically in order to grasp the strangeness of it all and the mystery and profundity. So here is the beginning of Sacred Sites. In the beginning, unutterable hot. No space, no time, not shape, not size, not taste, not smell, not see, not touch. A singular nothing, nothing at all, compressed to a point infinitely dense, wobbling. 14 billion years ago, colossal balloon, the Big Bang, seething radiation, roiling gaseous universe soup, pure energy pops riotous sparks, or the spectral harmonics of minute energy strings, wild infinitesimal bits, the 6 quarks, whirl in and out of colliding light, particle annihilating antiparticle, blasting photons at every turn. The first frenzied pips radiate forever into unfathomable mystery. What caused it? Came before it? Into what belly, what field did it blast? Energy to mass, mass to energy, plasma pounding to particles and back to wave. Gravity, overcome by the speeding inflation and walloping heat. The Big Bang births space as it expands, time as it travels, doubling its size in seconds. Shock waves throb through the plasma, ringing the cosmos like a temple bell. Temperature falling, the hot whirling slightly cools. 3 quarks cling to each other and settle as protons. 3 quarks cling to each other and settle as neutrons. Electrons settle. Forms ripen in nothing singular field. The same proton, neutron, electron throughout space and time. Star, tongue, tear, plastic fork. Our bodies as old as the cosmos. This is one of the most important lessons I learned from writing this book, that it's not like woo-woo to say we are all one. Yes, Western science and indigenous points of view concur. We really are all related. We're all made of one thing, just cooked into different forms. That's it. Here we are. All of us are relatives. Now I'm going to jump ahead many billions of years and go to an era that's being talked about in climate crisis discussions frequently, and it's called an era, a very short era, only about 5 million years long, called the Pliocene. It's an important era for us today, and here's why. The Pliocene was the transition time between the many millions of year old Miocene, and Southern California was here at that time with fantastical animals and plants. And I mean, the shoreline was different and so forth, but we were here. And the Miocene was hot, baby, hot. Carbon dioxide was between 400, 500, 600 parts per million. Carbon dioxide tracks heat. And so in that 5 million year old period of the Pliocene, carbon dioxide dropped from 600 parts per million to its Middle, where it was about 420 parts per million, which is about 3 million years ago. And by its end, another million years later, it had dropped to 220 parts per million. Now, the important feature of the Pliocene was that during those millions of years, Southern California completely changed from this tropical paradise to a world that we now understand as the Ice Age. And it illustrates how everything is connected. And here's the story. 3 million years ago, India, which is a continent of its own, by the way, carried along the mantle. India, thrust into Eurasia by the mantle, for millions of years shoves harder, continent into continent, towering overrides, thrusts, warps, and crumblings. The Himalayas billow toward 5 miles high, blocking shifting monsoons and the tropical jet stream. The Tibetan plateau freezes into an ice desert, shining sunlight back into space. Ice sheets advance as the North Atlantic shivers. The world cools, heats, cools. Along the Southern California coast, warm summer rains stop falling. And of course, in those millions of years, about 5 million years, the plants and animals completely shift to plants and animals that can survive in the Pleistocene, the Ice Age. And those of us in Southern California, can see these at the La Brea tar pits, the famous era in Southern California. The point is that by the beginning of the Ice Age, carbon dioxide had fallen to 220 parts per million. And it stayed that way for a couple of million years until about 1850. And that's when the British, having mown down and burned all the trees of Scotland, Ireland, and their own country, shifted to coal and other fossil fuels to burn to create steel. And from 1850 until now, 175 years, carbon dioxide parts per million have risen from 220 parts per million to over 400 parts per million as it was in the Pliocene, and then rising. We're headed back to the Miocene. This is not a good scenario for us. My current work is a collection called The Undertakers, and it addresses the war roots of the climate crisis. War is at the root of the climate crisis. The Department of Defense uses more fossil fuel than any entity on Earth, and rising wars manufacture climate crisis. And now we add the AI use of fossil fuels. It's a dire situation, and one that happens so fast. Now, in science, change is the nature of this universe. So change is not a bad thing. But if you noticed between the Miocene and the Ice Age, it was like 5 million years. People had time to adjust. Fast change, as in like an asteroid, is tragic for everybody. My next poem is dedicated to my student Jorge, who he was in my creative writing class at East Los Angeles College, where I taught. Jorge had come back from the Gulf War. This poem, and I read this poem because he taught me, intellectually, I suppose I knew, but he taught me at a visceral level the impact of war on soldiers. Desert Storm. For Jorge, Special Forces, Gulf War. When you take a life, slice across the throat, and drop a corpse, does his life become yours? Do you go home trailing spirits, the good soldier's reward, your hands full of kite strings, sailing 2 brown eyes, a scalp of black hair, like your own. Do they sing to you, or bewildered weep, Allah, Allah, where am I? Do they yank and tangle shredded uniforms, or float patiently along with your stride? When you take off your boots at your doorstep, who enters your house? You told me their eyes never close, as you were promised they would, when yellow ribbons knotted to trees fluttered mildly. You promised yourself to write a novel, snaring the faces, then cutting them loose so your daughter could play in your house. Waking life is a simple struggle compared to the anchorage of your sleep. Reeling moans exact your attention. Mouths never lose their gape of surprise when you efficiently grafted their lives onto yours, ruining a pair of black gloves, you told me, with each one in the ritual of blood brothers. December 2023. This poem is inspired by W.H. Auden's poem, September 1st, 1939, which he wrote on the eve of World War II. I sit where I always do, in the back, by a window, watchful and dismayed, as the horizon recedes into landscapes grayed with the productions of greed, measurements of the air, the water, the numbers hospitalized, crushed, starved, the ravages upon species already in extravagant decline. Waves of uncertainty pass through the sky, high, cold harbingers, storms already launched, speeding toward us, raining with grief. December is ending. The final month of the year carries over like prophets touted by managers of power, well-armed and consolidating over decades deep into the previous century and deeper even than that. Into this history arrives the pandemic of the death of life on Earth as we know it. Disappeared from their homes, who will miss the orb spider? Who will miss the earthworm, the house sparrow, or the albatross? The error bred in the bone waves the hand that counts only its own. Commons and culture displaced by weapons, genocidal wars, and billionaire investments in clear cuts, pipelines, and drinkable water. When we cut, we choke. When we mine, we choke. When we bomb, we choke. When we poison the water, we join the lineup, leading to the cliff we bulldozed ourselves. Our armies already direct us. But this rubble, piling higher in the ghostly, unerring future, radiates ironic points of light. Shouts ricochet in the streets. My cry is among them, one for the other, every one, a wealth of shapes, colors, species, breathing the same air provided by all that is green, living, and wild. For us, I offer these words. Inscribe them on a banner, a wall. Let them rise from our throats, calling out and singing words that center the street, that grapple the absolutely impossible. Forged by the heat of our pounding hearts, our voices mingle in rhythms older than this calamity, songs as old as the dawn, singing together. We know them. We know them. We know them by heart. This, my final poem, is dedicated to Robinson Jeffers, whose refusal to support war, even World War II, led to the collapse of his career. Fortunately, activism amongst poets has not been stopped and has risen since that sad time. Our genius. The toiled world heaves round and round its tilted trunk. We won't leave it alone. Leave it alone. Rest our hands in our laps. Work with our eyes, ears, nose, tongue. Work with our hearts. And stop piling stones. Stop piling stones. The wild world made cemetery. Stop piling stones. Rest our hands in our laps, or put them together to honor the scouring waves, glittering boulders, sedulous red earthworms, and the house sparrows. With our genius, we will learn these languages, sing these songs, learn from the winds where to stop and when, cleave to the web, and let the spiders teach us how weaving with all, we weave with the universe and infinity, tensile, transparent, vital. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan, for such a vibrant, conscious reading about, taking care of the earth and anti-war. Very poignant, and, it's factual, and it also has a lyricism in it, just as Whitman, was for the body and the earth, you're for the body and the cosmos. And so I appreciate that. When did you first become conscious of working for the environment?
Harry, my grandparents lived in the Antelope Valley when it was a wild place. And for all kinds of reasons, I was very urgent to get out of my household, my family household, and get up to the wild land of my grandparents' home as often as I could. And they had a pony for us, and I'd ride out into the wild desert. And I don't know, the crows and the Joshua trees and the sun and the persistent wind, they all spoke to me and created a kind of consciousness I've had ever since. My first act of activism was riding around on that pony, pulling up the survey stakes for the developments that were inevitably coming. But I did that, and it made me feel good.
Well, I have one other question. We have about a minute left. What is poetry? Poetry around the world and through the eons has always been a song structure, chants, spells, prayers, a compressed language that welcomes the voice, welcomes music, welcomes memory. Mm-hmm. And so I know there are many, there's no right poem or wrong poem, but for me personally, that's my poetic path. That's beautiful. And thank you for such a radiant reading. What you're talking about is important to all of us as well as the earth itself. So thank you, Susan Suntree. Our next poet is Michelle Bidding. Michelle Bidding was recently named a City of LA Department of Cultural Affairs Individual Artist Grantee and is the author of 6 poetry collections, including Nightmares and Miracles, to Sylvia's Press 2022, winner of the Wilder Prize, and named one of Kirkus Review's 2022 Best of Indie. Her chapbook, Dummy Ventriloquist, was published in 2024 by C&R Press. Recent poetry appears in the Slowdown Thrush Cleaver, the Poetry Society of New York's Milk Press, Heavy Feather Review, Split Lip, National Poetry Review, Catamaran, One Art, and is featured as Poem of the Week in the Missouri Review. Her forthcoming collection, Ruined Beauty, will be published by Walton Well Press in fall 2025. Bidding is writing a novel that centers around Los Angeles and her great-grandmother, stage and screen actor Beryl Mercer, and is senior lecturer in creative writing and literature at Loyola Marymount University. Here's a marvelous poet, Michelle Bidding.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much, Harry. Thank you, Jennifer and Susan. Thank you for that very extremely moving education on the land we live in, the universe where we are spinning inside of, and your harp music. And I love the image of you riding out into the Antelope Valley on your horse. It's wonderful. Pulling up the stakes. I'm going to, it's always such a pleasure to be here, Harry. Thank you so much for having me. I'm going to read a few poems from this latest chapbook that Harry mentioned, Dummy Ventriloquist. And I'm also going to read a few poems from my forthcoming collection, Ruined Beauty, which will be out from Walton Well Press in a few months. I'm going to begin with, this is a love poem for my husband, Phil Abrams, great actor. And it also touches on some of the more difficult and darker concerns of my family and youth and that sort of thing. It also, you'll recognize a line from E. Cummings in it, and I must say that this is a poem that emulates a poem by the great poet Joseph Millar called For Annie. Mine's for Phil. All day we've bent like Benedictine monks over armoires and bookshelves, rubbing the house clean of grime and wicked thick dust, pausing but once to drop our robes and oil each other bright as snakes entwined in the grass of our sun-bolted bed. You never left me, or the strange world of my childhood I carry like a mourner on my back, never quite able to set the black box down and leave it behind without turning back to turn it around. 3 decades I've waited to jump the suicide train, my family tracks like a runaway beneath coastal starlight. A Southern Cross I note and bind in books stretched from ghost smoke. Like a cigarette I wish I had, but I'm trying not to do that because I like my body when it's with your body. 2 strands of the same high voltage cable holding me damp and sparking day or night against the green skin of the dark. I'm going to kind of toggle back and forth here between Dummy Ventriloquist, a couple of poems there, and then manuscript, Ruined Beauty, which begins with two poems that I'm going to read that I wrote in the aftermath of the January 7th fires, when our home did, in fact, burn to the ground. And yes, it's been quite an odyssey since then, but we're doing just fine. This is a poem titled Sudden. Sudden was the fire, like a wolf at a live heart. So many things seemed filled with intent to be lost, but the only lasting truth was change. And if you had a limitless life, it would be a real problem for you. Still, I wanted to come home transformed and be surprised by the flickering in our radically impermanent robes, rain-soaked and ringed with succulents around a tiled patio where you'd put the fairy lights up, the mysterious nature of it, all our rooms, all our ash, now a form in emptiness to visit. Life as it really is, the inconsolable losses, the molten heart. The clearing. Funny to think how new I felt coming out of class that day, flush from the ballet rigors, sweating down the sidewalk, a manzanita in bloom, ready to begin again. I looked to the sky, to the speaking gull passing, and beyond her, an alien billowing mouth of dun and charcoal signs. I am remembering this while fumbling to clasp a bronze bracelet given to me after, because everything was lost, of course. The ungrace of this catastrophic state I lean into, searching the singed box found in the smoking ruins, sifting for recipes, for favorites of ancestors, where conversation flows more freely with the dead. All that I dream, more familiar since flames leveled our former life. The taste of newfound nothingness rendered sharper by bones, sinew, and cherry port. It rocks me gently, this bracing tonic poured over the lot. We visited it last night. I watched you walk across like an astronaut sinking 6 feet into ashen muck. I'm walking on the roof, you cried, disappearing into morbid glitter, into satin aftermath. Moon glow sifted over every beautiful thing, a lunar reduction. It looks like sunlit snow, said Buzz Aldrin when he first touched boot soles to it. Your pupils closed down, he said. Like layers of our lives contracting, we forget what has been, the record of the earth. I thought sometimes the sky's too bright, then everything upside down turns black. How can the moon be shining if we are standing on it? I asked you, my underworld husband, my confection. Let's concentrate on where we are now. Our cake of ambient people falling through rooms, through years, collapsed to one luminous moment. I see you in the house, there in our antique bed, your head between my legs, in the drowsy hours, our children chasing the dog, laughing at cartoons wrapped in Saturday morning, and blankets woven by aunties. Now I'm stirring a kettle of coq au vin in my best blue overalls. The hair at our temples glints of spare gray. Now I'm watching you pull a cake from the oven, the steaming gold dome of sherry and nutmeg batter. It sweetens the rafters worn bare by love and rage. In the end, we found a magnificent desolation and our way to see the stars through wars, through family demons and orbiting fires the world performs around us on a horizon clearly curving away like a smile in an unknown language. As kind of intimated in the first poem I wrote, dealt with suicide in my family, unfortunately twice with my brothers. And I've written pretty extensively about that. This is a very brief poem. It's also a poem for actors. It's called Poem for the Left Behind. Once I stood like an actor in a nightmare, except I was awake, and nothing fell from my mouth but silence, but wagging shadow. The singed tongues of my brothers rolled out on gurneys, their grave eyes searching the house for a line, for a life, and finding too soon only soil. That's from because life just keeps rolling and sometimes steamrolling, sometimes just more than you think you can bear. And we write and live and love and sing through it as best we can. 2 years ago, our younger son was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And he's young, he's in his 20s. He's doing great. He works at Warner Brothers now. But he did have to go through that for a year. And I wrote this poem, a couple poems during that time. This one is Ode to My Son's Birthmark. Stork bite, angel kiss, salmon patch of blush epidermis, pink palm print pressed to the back of your head and hidden until you merged with the light outside my insides. Summer flooding the hospital room in the city of Saint Monica, patron of mothers and famous for cheering son Augustine along his fraught, illustrious path. And isn't the world just like that? Mothers versus death since forever, as we followed it in history books and life. And certainly since you arrived on this planet, so breathtakingly artful in its design on evils and delights, on miracles and mayhem, and shame on us. And on me, forgetting your skull cap's masterpiece, the field of Rorschach's strawberry, where I'd plant my lips so often, letting your follicle fragrance fill me, a grace-given thing, this infant essence, fecund and flesh-scented, the bread of stars if they could exhale like animals, like the breath of heaven, really. Then the unseen illness, the taking of pictures, the requisite shearing of locks grown long in your young adulthood. I saw it, the good friends flying in with their weed and spirits, their laughter and raucous playlists, the ceremony of love your goofy lot performed, first braiding, then snipping, then shaving your head to its nubby minimum so the chemo sumo could not get there first. That fucking devil we bless and curse as it snaked its orange burn around your body in the coming weeks and months, and how the shearing brought the mark into view, the rouge kiss of a long-lost lover peeking through your homemade beanie, knit by a family friend from the church we don't visit anymore, not even on holidays, or to pray in pews under stained glass. Those ocular openings in the neo-Gothic vein since medieval Chartres, where divinity streams through. Oh, you brave and worthy knight, your body a cathedral, your bones holy relics, humming the hymns of coming health. And weren't we the ones back when, always first to the healing rail, our heads bowed to receive the woo-woo spirit, where most were too proud or embarrassed to kneel or believe, but we knew that the things worth knowing are not the things we know. And when God is gone, it means church is everywhere, and water might turn to wine and stones to gold. And the greatest moment in the service was when everything stopped and the veil of words dropped like a curtain of hair falling, and the people turned to touch each other, saying, "Peace be with you, and also with you." Their trembling hands, a little like newborn roses, opening to morning after the shadow of night has passed. We love our sons. We have two sons. So that son that I just read that poem about actually did the artwork for the cover for Dummy Ventriloquist. We're a arty family. We collaborate a lot. I'm going to read one more poem, and it's a bit long, but it's a fun one, and I think it's very quite appropriate for this reading today. Reading for the Motion Picture Television Fund and organization and the folks out there, because I'm obsessed with the long tracking shot in film. And of course, the one of the ultimate, right, the seminal or the iconic. There are many great ones. Tracking shot comes at the beginning of A Touch of Evil, and so I was really thinking about that, and I was thinking about how could I tell this story of this sort of personal coming of age moment that I've never forgotten about being in summer theater at a difficult, awkward time of my life. And kind of combining that with that opening tracking shot from Orson Welles' famous A Touch of Evil. A Touch of Evil. If you want a happy ending, that depends, of course, on where you stop your story. Orson Welles. Why pretend its wicked fingertip hadn't already found me that summer I was 12 and friendless between schools, lost in my awkward body and psyche, a war of worlds waged by gland and raging corpuscles running dialogue between my legs and brain's jejune tragedies? And why not join the community theater? Young talent aspiring to be seen. Wannabes signed on as juvenile background for the ersatz San Juan Hill street scenes of West Side Story, even though, like the famous opening tracking shot in Orson Welles' late noir gem that goes on and on without edit, from the close-up of a ticking bomb tucked into the trunk of a 56 Chrysler convertible, to the moment 3 minutes later when the newlyweds kiss and the car goes up in flames just beyond a border checkpoint, even though that was filmed in Venice, California, near the beach, and not in a Mexican town called Los Robles, out of which Chuck Heston emerges with faux black mustache, metal badge, bad accent, and last name Vargas. It's all a matter of illusion and suppression of people dying to be in America. And I, too, am an imposter from the west side of Los Angeles. And while I may be green, I know what it is to both bully and be bullied, the spiteful inner derangement that comes from that. So I figure I'll spend the summer where no one knows me and try to find a self while ogling grown-up actors who keep falling in and out of love and in and out of bed with each other, from what I can gather at my invisible edge of the commissary cart and overheated wings of Barnum Hall, where the hopeful neophytes gather to swoon and hiss at each other like bust-open fire hydrants in a mid-city heat wave. That is, when they're not called to kick a leg up or empty their lungs of song on cue under the hot stage lights as the sun grows long in tooth, only to get yanked at the end of Doggy August, which is the nature of love, I'm gathering, while doing my best not to fall off a labyrinth of catwalks and rails I've been assigned to clamber and scale like a gangly little bug alongside union grips and gaffers, as I am but a casting dot in the play's human scenery, and so not called much to rehearse. But Michael, the master flyman who makes the scenery soar and takes his job very seriously, while also maybe being a bad boy. I'm thinking, I'm not sure, but all those guys have tons of tats and pull up to the parking lot mornings a little worse for wear, red eyes, leathers, and Harleys, and no one will dispute the theater is a dangerous place with its web of intricate beams in the wizard dome overhead, but out of sight where the magic strings get pulled, where suddenly the backdrop of a high school dance turns dress shop interior or vertiginous maze of windows, bricks, and fire escapes, thanks to the perfectly balanced system of ropes, C-clamps, and pygmy weights, the dangling lanterns that weigh 50 pounds and will take your head off if they fall on you. But Mike, whose eyes match the butterfly blue of the SoCal Sea on a Venice postcard, ocean I grew up in, and also there's his wicked grin and billowing brown locks and a mustache that's a bit like Chuck Heston's in the flick I mentioned about Murder and Mayhem, which is how my insides feel most of the time. And maybe Mike senses this and knows what I need is some controlled burn, so to speak, a taste of managed danger, so I can better relate to the ticking clock inside, so it doesn't detonate all at once or until I say, because I'm controlling this shot and I'm the director of me, and I can stretch this out and continue to show up every day in my cheap, ill-fitting bell bottoms and dumb floral tees from JCPenney's, ready to climb higher and one-handed even. Yes, I am clutching each rung for dear life under my sweaty pubescent armpits, because they've tasked me with ferrying sustenance to the gaffers in the gallery, caddies of coffee and donuts from Winchell's, all the way up through the ropes and cables, the battens and pipes, the mid-travelers and fire curtain, up through the hellish swelter and moats that make me sneeze, and I have to stop and catch my breath sometimes and not look down or think about the rats in the massive deco walls, so that when I reach the top and give over the doughy and liquid goods, all I can do is roll my shaking fetal self onto the grid deck and fly Tower Summit, dizzy and more alive than ever, like I just grew a few inches or years. And Mike has a look of the devil about him. I mean, if my parents could see me, they'd have him arrested for child endangerment, I'm pretty sure, but I don't care, because I've let that girl go, dropped her down to doll, to dust, to ant on the boards 100 feet below, and I'm gasping a little when I hand Mike his styrofoam of brew and sticky maple twist, and when he peels the plastic white lid away and peers across the steam, sipping. His blue eyes slice through me, and I know I've done something holy. I could be in heaven. And then his head ticks to one side like a timer, and his smile clicks into place, and the silence around us explodes when he says, "You made it, kid. And look at that. Coffee's not just hot, it's on fire." Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Your poetry is so eloquent and vivid and clear, and you just have such great narrative. And your poem about your son was just stunning. And that last poem is a knockout. You just have such great depth and fluency in your writing. So you're a blessing. Thank you very much, Michelle, for love for your family and for, just the creative process that you take us through. Just endurance of the heart. That's what I get too. And so thank you very much. And your deftness and taking the themes, the tracking shot and your coming of age together and blending them so well and memorable. So thank you, Michelle Bidding. I'll ask you a question that I asked Susan, and then we'll bring her on. What is poetry?
Well, song. Yeah, odes. First poems were songs, odes, singing, incantation, the calling, the channeling. But also, poem, it's to make, right? The etymology, to make, and to keep that impulse, that desire, that yearning, that absolute necessity to just make. To make from what's around us keeps us alive, and is a hopeful thing.
Well, that certainly is a definition for your poetry.
Thank you.
Michelle, you just finished, so why don't you say a couple things about Susan and then vice versa? We have like 3 minutes left.
Yeah, I loved. Like I said in my prologue, preamble. Yes, I love the connection to the land and the layers and time, and then the calling and the conjuring and the naming of the universe and the cosmos, and then I just absolutely, and it's so important. And I love the science in it too, the particulars, the data that you weave in there with so much heart and calling and desire. And then, of course, I just love your origin story too, Susan. The riding out in the grandparents' land, and feeling. I think you said the incessant wind. Yeah, it's beautiful.
Thank
Susan.
you. I have to say, Michelle, that I agree with Harry. Your narrative grasp is just so wonderful. You can unfold a story, that's for sure. And I was especially touched, as Harry mentioned too. It just stood out, was the poem about your son.
Mm.
I felt a closeness to your heart, intimacy in that poem, and a vivid language that stood out to my ear. There's a lot of music in those lines. It's like a real song of the heart. It was just so touching. I didn't know, even it just carried me away. And I enjoy the other story poems basically, and that's always enjoyable. But that poem, that was a memorable one for me.
Thank you. Can I respond just for a second? Because it just occurred to me, I love that poem too. It's very, very near and dear. And it was inspired also by David St. John's Prayer for My Daughter. I don't know if you know that poem. It came out a couple of years ago, and it's the first poem in his new book, Prayer for My Daughter. So I was really trying, kind of channeling that and thinking about that. And also, I had been writing it, and then I was on my elliptical, and it's now gone in the old burned down house. And I was watching. I don't know if you know. There's a show, Outer Ridge, I think it was, with James Brolin and Lily Taylor. I don't know if they have another season, but I was watching it, and there's these billboards that keep coming up when he's driving around. The things you don't know, right? The only things worth knowing are the things you don't know. And then there's a moment where things have totally fallen apart, and Lily Taylor goes, "God is gone," right? And I went, oh. And I, jumped off and wrote those things down, and then they ended up coming back into the end of the poem.
Well, thank you very much, Michelle Bidding and Susan Suntree. And I will throw my 2 cents in. Poetry to me is spontaneous prayer too. And it's also speech that has eloquence. So we're all in there working in the I don't know what you call it, the black, whatever's in the earth that we're trying to get that's gold that is not harming the earth. And it's also an ascent out of the descent, getting an ascent out of the descent. So thank you very much for just a spectacular reading. And next Tuesday, we have the wonderful poets Jack Grapes and Christopher Buckley with us. And here's our great director, Jennifer Clymer.
Thank you.
Thank you both. I hope that we see you back here very, very soon. Yes, round of applause.